Hello everyone and welcome back to JDTV. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming, and in back-to-back videos I've brought on Manuel Veth from Transfermarkt, and today we are going to talk some potential transfers. So Manuel, I appreciate you coming on the channel once again. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Not too bad. We're going to highlight three players today, and I think they're three very interesting cases. We have Jacob Shaffelburg, Ahmed, and Jonathan David.
Yep.
So let's start with Jacob Shaffelburg, and the reason we're doing this video is because you actually kind of gave it to me. You put a tweet out touching on Jacob Shaffelburg and the fact that he's been very, very good for Canada. Had a really strong Copa America. A lot of Canadian fans are saying, why is he not in Europe already? It makes no sense. He should be there. And you kind of highlighted that yes, he's been great for Canada, but it hasn't really been at a consistent rate for Nashville, and you want to see him maybe produce a little bit more. So can you elaborate your tweet a little bit, and then we'll kind of get into whether we think he will make the move to Europe or not?
Well, first of all, I need to fact check myself. I said 1 goal and 2 assists, right? And what I did do, I excluded the CONCACAF Champions Cup. That was part mistaken, but also I think those, what was it, 2 goals and 2 assists that he did score on the CONCACAF Champions Cup date all the way back to March. And the reason why, and I'm going to be very, very transparent about this, the reason why I didn't include it is because I went on Transfermarkt and I looked at the stats for the season, and they weren't there, right? The CONCACAF Champions Cup stats weren't there. The reason why they are not there, for anyone who's asking, is because CONCACAF Champions Cup technically is a 2023-2024 competition. So by July 1st, those stats drop out of our database. They're still there. They're in the all stats category, right? But they drop out of the stats for this season because technically CONCACAF Champions Cup ended last season on the European calendar.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but that's not from me. That's how CONCACAF wants it. It's technically the CONCACAF Champions Cup is a 2023-2024 season. So, yes, sure. Let's make it 3 goals and 4 assists for those that have been in my mentions. I also want to point out that those extra goals and assists have been a while. It's September, right? And that my point, I think, still stands. I think he doesn't produce enough on the club level. I think even when you include that, it's another extra 3 games, right? So let's make it 24 games, 3 goals and 4 assists in 24 games for an attacking winger is not enough. That stands in stark contrast to the national team where he has been very productive. Just let me look up those stats, right? It's 4 goals in 17 games, plus a few assists. So a bit more productive, not much, but a bit more productive. Stands out more because it's on bigger scales. It's at the Copa America. It's against the US, right? So we see it. We see his productivity there. We see what he can bring to the field, and I think that is something that Canadians as a whole see, right? And we say, wow, he's such an amazing player, including myself. I think he's an incredible player, by the way. I think his speed, his ability to get into spaces, his ability to move the ball forward, these are underlying numbers there that are really encouraging, make him a really enticing prospect and a player that should probably play in Europe, right? I think the problem, though, has been that if I had someone say to me, like, well, if they scout, they will look beyond this. And I'm like, no, they don't. Like I've been really lucky in my life that I've met Billy Bean a couple times, right? The main person in the book Moneyball and later the film with which I don't think quite got across the point of the actual book, which was very much stat driven, right? And scouts, and this comes from baseball nowadays, they do look for potential, but they also look for actual productivity. And those actual productivity are often not just, they are the naked stats. They're the stats that we can see. They're not the in-depth stats. They will say, so if I'm a scout and I will go to my sporting director, I will say, well, we have this guy, Jacob Shaffelburg. He's a 24-year-old winger playing for Nashville, and he's really good. He's really fast. He makes a lot of space. He's creative. He helps the players around him. And then I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like a really enticing player. What are his goal scoring stats? And he's like, well, he has 1 goal and 2 assists in 21 games for Nashville, this season in US Open Cup and the MLS. It's like, well, that's not great. Like, do we think, like, why should we sign him? We need goals and assists. And it's like, well, yeah, but he can really move the balls from midfield. It's like, yeah, but right now we lost another winger who scored 10 goals. Like, do we think he can do that? It's like, well, he has the potential for it, but no one is going to pay 5 to 10 million euros for potential. They want to see the actual productivity on the field. And I think that is what's holding him back right now. You've seen that with Tajon Buchanan a little bit, right? His productivity was very high before he got his move to Europe, and then it really dropped in Belgium. And that was one of the main criticism when I talked to people. Transfermarkt, we have a crew in Belgium, and I talked to him like, why is he did get his move to Inter Milan eventually, but what is the issue here? And he's like, well, he just doesn't produce enough. He gets into the right spaces. He does, he does create opportunities for others, but his productivity is just not strong enough to warrant a 10 to 50 million euro move. And when he did eventually move, it was for a lot less, right? It was a budget move for Inter Milan. And yes, he is there now, and hopefully he comes back and healthy, but it was a bet that they took because it was cheap. And right now, Jacob Shaffelburg, because he does so well for the national team, unfortunately isn't cheap.
No, so, it's a really interesting point you make, though, because I remember during Copa America, obviously it's a big tournament, so there's a lot of interest. It was Canada's first time during like live streams and just in general on videos. Yeah. The number one comment I saw, who's number 14? Yeah. And people were asking it all the time because Shaffelburg was so direct. He had a really good tournament. He did it on a big stage. And a lot of the times that's simply just enough. Like whether you're great at your club level, if you go to a World Cup, Copa America, it wouldn't be as shocking if Shaffelburg did get the move. Yeah. But that's kind of what we're going into now as to maybe why he didn't. And the interesting thing is we had a Tajon Buchanan who was playing at Inter Milan, and Jacob Shaffelburg basically before the injury, bumped him out of the lineup where Tajon was on the bench, and then he came on, and then I believe he got injured, and that obviously ended his tournament. So I guess, Manuel, because Canadian fans want to see Shaffelburg make the move to Europe, I think he's good enough, and I think he can too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So at the age of 24, he's turning 25 in November. Do you think it's realistic? Now he's happy. He really likes Nashville. I know he's about to have a child with his wife, so big congratulations to him. And Cloak put out a report in the summer saying that a couple leagues that were interested in him was Belgium, the Netherlands, and then Mexico. So looking at his profile, I'm curious to see, where do you think a realistic landing spot could be for him if he moves to Europe? Because I kind of am looking at that Belgium, Netherlands. Yeah. I don't really want to see him go to Mexico, but I think that he could be an intriguing prospect for a club that's maybe willing to take a risk. It's just whether they can find an evaluation, I guess, with Nashville to bring him over. Well,
that's a big problem, right? Nashville is a very hard club to negotiate with. We saw that with Hani Mukhtar and the amount of money that they are asking for transfers. It's very hard to get players out of there, and MLS clubs right away always ask for a lot of money. We gave Shaffelburg a market value increase after the Kobe, because and it's actually really interesting that you mentioned this, because Soccernomics, the book, really warns clubs to not sign players on the back of big tournaments, because the prices are always inflated, right? And tournaments are actually a really terrible sample size for players, because there's players that do fantastic at tournaments but then don't translate it to the club level. The one that always comes to mind is James Rodriguez.
Yeah, that's
fantastic player that for the national team, not so great for the clubs that he's playing for. Bale is another one, right, who's always done so well for Wales and didn't quite translate to Real Madrid. So the question then becomes, is Shaffelburg a typical national team player? Like, does that just work there? And also Nashville is not playing a great season. We have to really point that out too. Hani Mukhtar's productivity has dropped significantly this year, and that's probably also hurting Shaffelburg. So, but then as a scout, you also will say, well, oh no, the main guy's productivity has dropped. Now his productivity has also dropped. Is he just a player that plays off another player and produces because of that? We see this go to another sport. We see that in hockey all the time, right? I assume that most people watching this video know hockey really well, but there's always that winger that scores really well because he plays with someone like McDavid or Sidney
Well,
Crosby.
are you going to bring up Huberdeau? Is that where is that where you're going with it?
Sure. But that's a really good example, right? Because he played with Barkov, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that is always, that is the question then. Was Shaffelburg really productive because he played with a very productive Hani Mukhtar? And it's really just his goals and assists are just a waste product of him playing with another great player. So does he make the system as a whole better? And I think that is something that he will have to prove, or maybe he doesn't want to prove. You hear, I've been to Nashville. It's a great city. The weather's always nice and warm. It's great if you're single. It's great if you have family, because there's lots of nice places to live. Lots of other sports things going on. They have a great hockey team. They have an NFL team, so you're never bored. There's live music everywhere, and maybe you don't want to leave. That's up to your own ambition, I guess, of what you want to do with your own career, because you probably also will earn less in Belgium when you make that move at first, right? And does a Belgian club want to risk paying 8, 9, 10 million euros on a bet? That is the other question. And sometimes these players that are just on this cusp of being up on that next level price themselves out, and maybe that's what's going on here as well.
We'll have to wait and see. This one of the number one questions I get asked from Canadian fans is just why hasn't he moved? And I guess time will tell. I think there's a chance, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll move on to another player that I haven't really seen any links to Europe, but I think it's a player that absolutely can go there, and he's just blossoming right now at the Whitecaps with the Canadian men's national team, and that is Ali Ahmed. I'm curious to see where you could think a landing spot for Ali could be. I think the only rumor, and I don't know how legit it ever was I think Sporting was one of the teams that was mentioned linked to Ali a while ago. But watching him play right now for the national team, and he's doing with the club team as well, is just a breath of fresh air. He's versatile. We touched on this in the other video. He can play in the midfield. He can play out wide. I think he's so technically gifted. We've seen him obviously be able to press as well, so he can he can do it going forward. He can do it going back. I think he's very clever. I'm complimenting him quite a bit because I've just watched him play 2 games for Canada where he really impressed me. You see him a lot with the Whitecaps. Do you think he has what it takes to go to Europe? And if so, where's a landing spot that you think could suit his game?
Well, his fortunate position is that he is with the Whitecaps, who have been a bit better facilitating players going abroad, especially young Canadian players, and sometimes to their own detriment because they then turned out to doing quite good things abroad, right? He's with ATG Management, that's Alfonso Davies' agency, quite close, I think, too, with Fonzie. And we just seen Jaden Nelson. He's also with ATG go from Rosenborg to SSV Ulm in the Bundesliga, second Bundesliga, right? So this is what I really like about them as an agency is that they have lots of links all over Europe. They don't park all their players in one country specifically. They really spread it out, and they really do look at career paths, and they are also will say to the client, like, look, you might be making a little less here, but in the long term, this will actually work for you career-wise. So I think that is a really something that I can see with Ali working in his favor. If there is a place for him in Europe, something like the second division in Germany, that's maybe a good next stop for him to kind of show that he can play in this maybe a little bit higher professional level. Then, or maybe Belgium as well, a mid-tier team in Belgium where he gets playing time, right? That's important. You need playing time, especially for a player like that. And then, of course, the Netherlands is always another one. I do think that his skills translate quite well because he can play so many different roles. So you can get this is where scouting really does play a big role with a player like that, because he is someone where naked productivity doesn't quite matter as much as the underlying stats. And I don't have it in front of me, but he's quite high up in ball progressions and dribblings and successful dribblings in MLS among all players, not just among Whitecaps players. So that is something where coaches will say, well, he has that kind of profile where we can fit him into different roles and he will do quite well there. So that speaks for him, and I don't think he's going to be very expensive. right? So you can take a bet on him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's probably primed a little bit more than Jacob
Yeah.
Shaffelburg to get that move for the several reasons you kind of
He doesn't
highlighted.
score the highlight reel goals for Canada, and that
No.
actually is kind of a good thing for him.
But he's like, it just he does it quietly, and I really think that game against Mexico, I saw a different side to Ali Ahmed. That was a true CONCACAF game. It was an ugly game, but he still found a way to shine. He did a great job on just recovering the ball and being a good player on the defensive side of the game, but going forward and having no problem in drawing fouls and creating chances and little combinations play in such an ugly match, I think showed. And he put in a bit of quality. That goal could have easily been in. That could have been the game. And I think he's on a really good path right now, and I would love to see him land somewhere in Europe, and I can definitely back him for it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, such an interesting player, and it was, honestly, also such a nice guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've interviewed him a couple times, both exclusive, but also post game, and he's just a nice guy. So you want him to be successful.
Alex and I have interviewed him once, but Alex has talked with him several times, and he's like, "You're gonna love him. He's such a good guy, such a funny guy."
Great person.
And it was a good interview. But the final player we will touch on today is a very different situation to Shaffelburg and Ahmed, and that is Jonathan David. We won't go into it too much, but I think it's worth bringing up because I'm just going to try to name some of the teams recently that he's been linked to. We have Juventus, Inter Milan, AC Milan, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, City, apparently Barcelona, Real Madrid. Like he gets linked. He does a couple Saudi clubs as well. He gets linked pretty much everywhere. And I cover him quite a bit. He is one of my favorite players to watch. Obviously, being biased, being Canadian, but I truly do believe he can take that next step to a top club. I just don't really know where. He's 24 years old right now. It looks like he's going to see out his contract, become a free agent, which you would imagine would open doors. He's a free agent, right? Like that's a big opportunity for clubs to take a look at a younger player who can maybe fit your style, but has proven that he can score at the international level and in a top 5 league. However, there will be fees attached to free agents, and I don't know. I want to gauge what you're thinking about Jonathan David and where you kind of think he could end up, because I know that Italy is known for signing free agents. There's not like Juventus, Inter Milan. We've seen them bring in different strikers over the years that are on free agents. The money is mostly in Saudi, but now there's still money in the Premier League. So Tottenham's another team that has been linked with him. Chelsea love throwing dumb money around. So I have no idea, Manuel, but where do you think he could maybe go?
Such a difficult one, isn't it? He gets linked to so many clubs every transfer window, and I think for the last 24 months, and another deadline day came and passed on August 30th, and he's still there. He's still in with Little. And that is, I think, very interesting in so many ways, because I think you and I both have seen the tweets by other journalists still repeatedly saying every time there's a Jonathan David story, it's like, oh, well, Man United are interested, Tottenham are interested, AC Milan are interested, Inter Milan are interested. I think the one really true link that I've reported and I can confirm was true was the Al-Ali rumor that was 12 months ago, right? They offered him a 12 million euro salary, and that was rejected. I think they were actually looking for a little bit more than that, and that explains to you maybe why it's been so difficult to move the player, because if that is the sort of salary you're looking for, there's not many places in the world that pay that, right? We have a very similar kind of situation between Bayern Munich and Alphonso Davies, where the salary demands are very high, and Bayern Munich are one of the top 3 teams in the world when it comes to paying salaries. And they're going, everyone who's followed me and listened to our Gegenpressing podcast knows that Bayern Munich are desperate to bring those salaries down because it's way too high. We're talking about an environment where many clubs in the world, including in the Premier League, are looking to bring salaries down, right? Which is why you see so many players moving on to Saudi or even Qatar, because the salaries that were paid by these big clubs, this is pretty much the only place where you can still get it. We had the story of Kingsley Coman, right, who Bayern Munich were hoping to offload to Saudi, him in a 17 million euro salary. So if that is the sort of salary you're looking for, there isn't many places in the world that still offer that, and that is very tricky. It's a very tricky place to be. So I think, I don't know. What do you think? Who has that sort of money?
It's going to be down like you mentioned. I think Jonathan David, and I hope Jonathan David is the type of player that wants to play at the highest level he can. If he's got to give up a little bit of money to make that move happen, great. I think that he's coming in as a free agent, which will obviously get you a little bit higher of a salary. That's just how it works. I have a feeling I'd like to maybe see him land in Italy, like with a Juve, but I have a feeling if he's going to stay at the top level, he will go to the Premier League because yes, they maybe don't have the money like Saudi does, but they have money still. I think there's a few different homes. If a Richarlison just hypothetically moves on to Saudi and takes the big bucks, or they shift him off, there could be a home there at Tottenham. Chelsea, you never know what they're going to do. They're a wild card. Like what? They need a striker still. They didn't get Victor Osimhen.
Yeah, but we don't even know what the ownership situation is there. Like right now, Todd Bowley and the rest of the ownership group are in what has been termed a civil war. Right? The New York Times reported this yesterday. There is a huge upheaval there. I don't know.
But would it surprise you? Like that's what I mean. Like it wouldn't surprise me if they just said screw it. We'll bring in a player. But I'm not saying it will be Chelsea. I'm just using him as a wild card example because you just don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So it depends. But like I would be pretty gutted, and I know I'm pretty sure I can speak for most Canadians saying if he ended up in Saudi, it would just be super disappointing. We've seen huge clubs link for him with years, and I think that he's done it at the international level. He's done it at a league like Liga with Lille. He's good enough to get a move to a top club. I'm hoping that he's willing to sacrifice and make that move happen. I've seen quotes, when he speaks to journalists talking about wanting to go to the Prem, that his options are open, that he wants to play at the top level. And I truly believe that he backs himself to be able to be successful. So it's going to be very fascinating because there's no more negotiation with Lille to try to find, that 50 million euro price tag. He's going to be a free agent. There's going to be options. He's going to be intriguing to several clubs, and we're just going to have to see if he's, willing to make those demands work and make that move. Otherwise, it could be a story of what could have been if he ends up taking the bag and goes to Saudi.
Yeah, I mean, that is the difficult question, right? It also depends on what's happening next summer. There's always that one striker that goes and then it creates this domino. But, there is a really recent example of how badly it can go with Victor Osimhen, right? His predecessor at Lille, and how he really banked on this move to Chelsea, and at the end of the day that didn't happen, and now he's playing in Turkey on loan, right? Yeah. Because that was the only way to get out of Napoli, and we'll see what happens in the summer, but in January and then next summer. But it's really difficult at times if you don't make that right decision right away, and if the agent asks for too much money, and if that torpedoes a move at the last second, and then it all fall apart, and so many clubs are still relying on getting a move done last second, right? Deadline day. Like every year we covered deadline day in great depth on Transfermarkt, and every year I'm like, surely clubs have learned. And every year they have not, and every year they're pushing something through, and they're getting extensions, and Sterling gets signed like 2 minutes after midnight, and there's like some extension by the Premier League that they can get done, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this Jonathan David situation is incredibly fascinating. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see what's going to happen with his contract. If Lille are willing to let it run out, maybe someone is going to take a bet on him in January, right, to sign him for a lesser fee because Lille wants the money. It is incredibly fascinating. But my final thought on this has been that for the last 24 months we've been told he's going to leave Lille in France, and he hasn't.
I mean, the interesting thing is there is a report that, or I think he said it himself, that he's keeping all options open. So an extension at Lille, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but like that was floated out there that if at the end of the day there's not an option, maybe he will do it. I don't think so. If he lets his contract run out, he is in a good position to try to at least look at proposals and sign somewhere. But if you have noticed, and we won't get into that right now, but if you notice the free agency this summer, I mean, you got still some big players, Rabiot being one of them, that just can't find a club. Clubs don't want to pay that crazy free agent money anymore. And so yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It's definitely a fascinating story, but I want to hear from you guys down in the comment section. What do you think about Shaffelburg, Ahmed, David? Where would you like to see them go? Do you agree with what Manuel and I have said? If you don't, let us know. And as always, Manuel, I appreciate the time you coming on, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
We'll definitely chat again soon. It's great that we've done it back to back.
There we go.
The gap between that was way too long, so let's don't make the gap that long again.
Absolutely. Then we will chat soon.
Absolutely.